remember that I think it was at one chiropractic meeting somewhere that I followed BJ, and he was a very difficult man to follow on the platform. And I recall, and I say this not for the benefit of some of you who may have heard me talk so many times, but rather for the oncoming generation, as Perry indicates, who may not have, who may need some filling in about the whole trend and the whole, you might say, drive and drift of the profession and my involvement in it. But I remember, I think it was out in L.A. where I was asked to follow BJ, and I said to myself as I was sitting there, how's a person going to really keep this high consciousness of an audience after BJ has had a hold of you? And a story came to mind that I did think had a sense of humor. It was the story about a man who had a circus, and his lion tamer died. And he was looking for a new lion tamer, and he advertised in a paper, and a man and a woman from various parts of New York came down to the training grounds, and they said that they knew something about lion taming. So the manager, this is the story I told, so the manager took them down to the cage where the ferocious lion was on his perch, and the manager said to the man and the woman, which one of you would like to go in first and show me what you can do? And the woman said, I don't mind. So they opened the cage, and she went in, they closed the cage. The lion began to growl and look very ferocious, and the woman took off her clothes down to a very mini bikini. And the lion jumped from his perch and began to, as if he were going to attack her, and then he put on the brakes. When he was a few feet away from her, he went quietly over to her and he licked her up one side and down the other, and went purring back to his perch. And the manager said to the man outside, he said, do you think you can do better than that? The man said, I don't know, but if you get that darn lion out of there, I'll sure as heck try. Now, I remember that, I remember how that saved me that night, that little touch of humor. And I was thinking when Betty was speaking that it's very serendipitous, and this is a word I don't like to throw at you necessarily, but it's the title of one of my latest books by Prentice Hall for $4.95, and I was thinking when Betty was speaking what a beautiful job she did with this story and how she wove her remarks, and it was very, I thought, effectively done. But I had a story too that had to do with a team of horses, a story that came up during the energy crisis. And a man felt that it would be a better part of wisdom to perhaps invest in a team of horses, and he went around to the seller of horses, and the seller said, well, he said, I just have one team left. And the reason this team didn't sell is because it is a rather religious team of horses. And the man said, what's religious about it? And the seller said, well, he said, you know, when you want this team to go, you don't say gedap or get going. You say, thank God. And when you want it to go a little faster, you say, thank God, thank God. And when you want it really to take off, you say, thank God, thank God, thank God. And when you want this team to stop, you don't say, whoa. You say, amen. The man said, well, I've always purported to have been rather religious, so he bought the team, and He tried it out on its various directives. He was sitting with the reins loose in his hands, his feet up on the dash, and he was driving along. And he said, thank God, and they just took a little pace, thank God, and they went faster, and thank God, thank God, thank God. They really took off. Now, the only trouble was that these horses had been trained in a sort of a different age, and they happened to pass a rock festival out in California. And when the horses heard this rock music, they became terribly annoyed, and they broke into a runaway. And the man came to life and pulled on the reins and said, whoa, whoa, stop, you know, darn you and all of this. But he'd forgotten the word. Frantically, he saw the horses veer in their runaway pace, and they came right to the edge of a precipice. And the man saw this coming. He pulled on the reins and he said, whoa, please, stop. Nothing happened. Just as they came to the edge, the word came back to him and he said, Amen. And they stopped, right dead in their tracks. He leaned back and he said, thank God, thank God, thank God. Well, anyhow, that's the story. Now, that's about the extent of my humor. But anyhow, I don't know, after Dr. Gilardi and Dr. Sherman and whoever else was involved in my coming here presented an invitation for me to meet here tonight. I know that many of you who've been around where I've spoken, many of you who knew BJ as well or better than I did, you must know, I'm sure, the emotion that is in my heart. And you must feel, as Betty has said, the high state of consciousness in this tent. I felt when I came on the grounds, saw the beauty of this place, and felt really the regression in memory for a little while to the big tent in Davenport, to everything that was aspired to there and was inspired by those meetings. That here is something that is almost, I think, beyond articulation so far as chiropractic history is concerned. There's something happening here these days and something happening tonight that I believe will lay the groundwork and an onward going plan for the future of chiropractic in a way that I have never experienced before, and I tell you this in all honesty, from the bottom of my heart. I remember, since my work is in the field of religion, and part of my study, of course, has been to live with people who live in different cultures, I remember having shared in the dedication of the great Baha'i temple at Wilmette, Illinois. I had the same kind of a feeling then. I had the feeling that something was transpiring, which was really fantastic. That here in a field, a multi-million-dollar temple had arisen. And I went back in my study of the Baha'is, and I realized that about the time of World War I, it was said that Abdul-Baha, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, came to Wilmette toward the close of day with a group of the faithful. They found this place not far from Lake Michigan, and he took a field stone and he laid the field stone in the center of this grassy acreage, and he said, the temple is already built. I don't suppose there is a Baha'i anywhere who has ever forgotten those words. And I know of very few Baha'is who, even though they were not there at the genesis and the founding of this temple, which is called the Mashriq al-Atkar, the Temple of Light, that hasn't been inspired to return again and again to Wilmette and this place where something started as something is starting here. And I'm very happy to have a share in it, but when I say that, I know that I am only feebly echoing what must be in your heart and mind at this particular time. And I just wish for you and for chiropractic the onward going growth of the Sherman College. And I want to talk to you very, very frankly. And the views expressed on what I'm going to say are strictly my own and in no way reflect the views of my sponsors. And if some of this doesn't particularly scan with what you're thinking or what you know about chiropractic, just say, well, this is what Bach thinks, but it may be contrary to what I have in mind. I've run through the rostrum of the staff in the flyer that I got, in the Lyceum bulletin that I got. I know some of these people. I know their qualifications, I think. I believe that they have felt as I have felt, that there has always been a gap somewhere in chiropractic. I believe that they realize, as I realize, that chiropractic must not only adhere to the traditions of the past, but must also come of age in the present. And how this can all be put together is something that I recognize as probably the greatest challenge, as I felt already in the talk that we just listened to. There's a great challenge involved here, because the age is changing. The consciousness of people is changing in regard to health and healing. I am right at the very heart of this, and I want to take a few moments to give you this quick orientation, particularly the young students, the students who are here. I want you just I want to share with you and have you share with me just a quick capsulized view of my work and how I became interested in chiropractic. You see, my work is really, you might say, in the spiritual field. It is an attempt to find out why people believe as they do, why we have these differences in doctrine and dogma, etc., what there is in the human psyche that is on this perpetual quest, that is willing somehow to experiment and endure, and to continue its questing about the so-called unknown. This I think is something that is coded in every individual. We're all religious by nature. Many of our adverse conditions in life are by reason of the frustration of the consciousness which we so strongly feel that we can do better, and something doesn't allow us to do better, can be frustrating. The fact that we feel that health is our heritage, but we're sick, can make us schizoid. The fact that we in the Western world should be affluent, and many people are poor. In my work with students, I know that it is a contradiction to them when they know that war is obsolete, that they feel that they don't quite have the full answer for a peaceable world or a peaceable kingdom. Even the fact that we must have a confrontation with failure on the way to success is difficult for many people to understand. And yet these are the things which are goading us on to come into the great fullness of spirit, you might say, that I believe is our heritage. So my work, as many of you who are older know, began with a retreat in a Trappist monastery. I went from there into the self-crucifiers in New Mexico. I went from there through about 30 years of research and teaching off and on to live with about 40 different groups around the world, from the Zen and the Theravada Buddhists to the Voodoo people in Haiti, to a kibbutz in Israel, to life among the Arabs in Jebjenin and on the Arab Crescent. I'm not parading where I've gone or what I've been doing, only to say that I want to make one point as clear as I can, that I hope that the chiropractor of tomorrow will recognize that historically the physician and the priest were always united in one person. The person who, like Hippocrates, whom the AMA stole, as I say in my book, The Chiropractic Story, they usurped him. They took this drugless physician and they made him the father of allopathic physicians. But Hippocrates, you see, was a priest in the temple of Aesculapius. He was a priest and he was a physician. Imhotep, who predates Hippocrates by a couple of thousands of years probably, was also a priest and a physician. And as I've studied the history of healing from the time of the first heart transplant 2,000 years before the time of Christ in China, recorded in the medical book of the Yellow Emperor, Huang Li, I realized that something happened somewhere along the way. The spiritual consciousness and man's respect for health, or his dedication to health, they went their separate ways and they diverged. And the point that I'd like to make, only because of the limitation of time, I'd like to trace this whole course for you. But all I can say is that chiropractors, particularly you chiropractors who are going to be trained in this new school, please remember, at least trust me to share with you the fact that you are eyewitnesses to a phenomenon which our age has never seen before: the closing of the gap between the psyche and the soma. The coming of what I call the total health of the total person, body, mind, and spirit. Now, to many of you who are so well versed in this field, this may be old stuff, but you know the coming of psychosomatic medicine helped to bring this more closely together. The coming of the faith healers, such as a Catherine Kuhlman, an Ora Roberts, a Harry Edwards. The recognition of the psychic healers of the Philippines, whom I researched a few years ago. The concept of biofeedback training. The coming of the various new behavioral science disciplines. The great recognition that a disease can be caused by a psychochemical imbalance. All of these things are now converging, I'm not saying in chiropractic, but among the general public and the laity of our time, toward a new look at the place of healing in the life of man. And you can just bet your life that something that I said long ago is coming to pass. It is this: that there is a groundswell, there is an uprising in the minds of students of college age, in the minds of people of in a later age bracket, there is an uprising and a challenging of the medical profession's claims as there has never been before. And you can just bet your life on this. And I didn't come here to damn the AMA. I just want to say to you, that a climate, an orientation, a state of consciousness is being created in the Western world and indeed around the world, which is making people more and more awake and more eager, I believe, to discover the deep reaches of chiropractic treatment and chiropractic care and chiropractic as a science and as a technique and as one of the great healing arts. Now this time is now. And I believe that if a chiropractor could fix this in his consciousness, then he would look upon his patients and he would look upon life and probably upon his whole educational process differently than he did before. Because it has really come of age. I remember in Lyceum, when I was on the program there in the days of BJ, I remember that I once compared the rise of chiropractic to the rise of some of the emerging religions of our time. Now the reason I want to be very careful in sharing this is that I am not misunderstood, as I have been misunderstood. I'm not saying this in any martyr-like fashion. But when I compared chiropractic to the rise of the emerging religions, I didn't mean that chiropractic was or is a religion. I meant only that the opposition of the established institutionalized church, which damned metaphysical groups, which closed its doors to Christian Science. And I'm not comparing chiropractic to Christian Science either. I'm just speaking of a sociological phenomenon in the world, which locked its doors against unity, which shut out new thought, which would have nothing to do with theosophy, which said that spiritualism is of the devil, which believed that anything parapsychological was not religious and could not be condoned. I have just been involved within the past week, will you believe this, that transcendental meditation, a course that I took in Delhi, as I've taken all of these courses in meditative practices, would you believe it, that in Fairfield, Iowa, not too far from Davenport, last night, the transcendental meditation people negotiated, and I suppose it has been consummated, for Parsons College, a $10 million campus, to come there and to establish a new university in which to teach TM, Transcendental Meditation. And do you know what's happening in Fairfield? The opposition from the entrenched religious groups has been mobilized to try to keep TM out of town. They don't know anything about it, but they don't like the name. All they know about Maharishi is that he has a beard. They don't like that. And there's a big PR relationship going on, and many of them don't like that. And so they are fighting it. But I just want to say to you that something is happening, you see, in the whole relationship of our involvement with life. And so as the establishment, as the medical profession, the entrenched drug cartels fought chiropractic, so the traditional church raised their opposition to the emerging religious groups, were they Jehovah's Witnesses or Christian Scientists or Unitarian, whatever was new, they had to oppose. And how did they ever gain a foothold? Well, you know, because chiropractic tells the story. Now I want to do something tonight, and I want to do it very quickly. This may have sounded like a very long wind-up, but I know when we have to be out of here. Perry made this very clear to me. said by 12:30 we've got to go. So I want to come to a topic now that really I'm not negative or anything, but I'm realistic enough to know that I may conceivably again be misunderstood as I have been, not by chiropractors necessarily, but anyhow. You see, may I say this one other thing, so that then I'll be. I hope that you'll believe me when I tell you I'm speaking from my heart. You see, I was the first person who ever brought a chiropractor to a university campus, as far as I know. This was about 1940, and I got my degree at Iowa in 42. I was the first person to ever bring a voodoo priest, a white voodoo priest, to the university campus. I was the first one to bring a psychic, Arthur Ford, to the university campus. I was the first one to introduce to America to a bona fide yogi, and some of you younger people know him, Swami Vishnu Devananda. And I just want to tell you that I know what it is to try to introduce new ideas. As George Kettering once said, when he got an honorary degree at Bradley University, where they gave me an honorary degree, George Kettering said, "We can send a radio wave around the earth in a matter of seconds, but it still takes a generation to get a new idea through a quarter inch of a man's skull." And at any rate, do you know that about 10 years ago, I came back from Taiwan, Taipei, and Mrs. Bach had been with me as she accompanies me on these research trips, and I had been researching acupuncture. We came back, and she had pictures of me with a needle stuck in me. I had a story about Dr. Wu Wei-ping, who was and still is, I guess, the international president of the Acupuncture Society. And I came back all in heat, you might say, about acupuncture. I wrote an article about it. I sent it out to some magazines that have published some of my articles. Nobody wanted to handle this article on acupuncture, and they didn't handle it. The only magazine that picked it up was a little magazine called Fate Magazine, F-A-T-E. And that kind of needled me, you know. But at any rate, all I'm saying is that when acupuncture caught on through the ping pong ball that opened the doors of China, and when Brother Nixon, I say that with qualifications, when Brother Nixon sent his team of MDs over there, and they came back and suggested there must be something to it. Well, from that time on, acupuncture, you see, has caught the imagination and has stimulated a great deal of interest in the concept that there might conceivably be a web of life which is related to the fascia or to some kind of a meridian system, and that the acupuncture points may actually have in their way a great deal of merit in the alleviation and the cure of disease. And just at the present time, I've gotten on the steering committee of a group known as the Rolfing Society. And here again, you have a new group coming along through Dr. Ida Rolf, who's been working in the field for over 50 years and has been put down, but now, today, for the first time, has an opportunity to share without being laughed at or written off, without investigation, some of the techniques that she feels may be workable and have been workable in the establishment of a more integrated structure as over against the random structures that she talks about. This is not a plea for Rolfing, heavens knows. It's just I'm just sharing with you, leading into what I now want to say. The topic is really my reminiscences of BJ, or my concept of BJ in the light of our time. I want to draw on this an analogy. I want to tell you there are few people that stand out in everyone's mind. And I believe that, as far as I'm concerned, in my work on college campuses with students, I know that I am involved in a very tenuous set of circumstances. It can be understood if I can sit down quietly with a student and talk to him about it, but it's difficult to do this probably with audiences. But one of the tenuous circumstances is this. I believe that we do need a guru. And yet I believe in the same breath that if that guru takes the place of the guru in you, that then we are on dangerous ground. I believe that chiropractic desperately needs a revival of the spirit and the passion and the love and the commitment and the courage of BJ. Don't you? And yet I believe that if BJ sort of becomes a scapegoat, you might say, and we hold him up and we say, well, this is the man, forgetting that really the man is you and I am the man. Each person is the man. Then I think we have let the guru down. And I don't mean to pin guru on BJ, though he might not have minded it. Now, what I want to do now, very quickly, I want to share with you a concept. That's all, just a concept. And I want to compare BJ. I thought first I'd use Dr. Schweitzer, with whom I spent some time in Lamborghini, but I kind of discarded him for the reason that it wasn't really, it didn't serve a fair enough analogy. I thought of using Vinoba Bhave, Gandhi's rightful successor, with whom I walked for some time the dusty roads of India. He's Gandhi's rightful successor, as I think I mentioned. I thought of a number of people that I have known who've greatly influenced my life, and thought, with whom can I compare BJ to find an analogy which will broaden the scope of what I want to say. I thought of Helen Keller, fantastic person, who, though she couldn't speak, couldn't hear, became one of the greatest, probably, exponents of a life of commitment of any American that we've ever known. In fact, when I lectured, as Perry mentioned, on some State Department assignments in foreign colleges, and I would ask, whom do you consider one of America's greatest people, even higher than JFK, they would say Helen Keller, because she had walked among them. I want to do something. I'd like to take the concept of the Christ. Now, this is where I could be very radically misunderstood. And I don't think BJ, whose spirit certainly must be moving through this tent tonight, if there's anything to an afterlife, if there's anything to consciousness, if there's anything to discarnate entities, if there's anything just to the play of life upon life, he certainly must be here. And I know probably he would smile and probably bite his lip a little bit and say, well, Mark, if that's the way you feel, go ahead, but I don't go along like that, you know. I remember once how he told me, did you ever know this? And I hope BJ won't listen in too closely on this, but you know, he was very interested in spiritualism, but he didn't go as far as spiritualism as I did. And did you know that one time he bored a hole in a certain place, in a certain room, above a certain room in Davenport, so he could peephole on a psychic whom he had invited there, so that he could see what she was, you know, taping to herself in the way of angel's hair and things like that. He never told you that, I guess. Well, anyhow. And you know, of course, what happened to his whole collection of phallic symbols. And so he has his own ideas about these things. But at any rate, I'd like to draw an analogy. And I predict, if I may be so prophetic, that probably as days go on and as you think about this, you may begin to agree with me as I tell you how I view BJ in the light of our time. You know, after the death of Jesus, whoever he was and whatever he may have been, one thing, I'm sure he was a great teacher. You know, after his death, people had an idea that what he wanted was a church. And they got together, and pretty soon they developed a monolithic church. And this monolithic church became known as the Catholic Church, which means the Church Universal. And in the 11th century, there was a schism. And the monolithic church became two churches, the Church East and the Church West. That is, the Byzantine Church and the Latin Church. And then in the 16th century, there was another schism. They called it a Reformation. And before Martin Luther died, there were already four great wings of new churches: the Lutheran, the Presbyterian, the Evangelical, the Anglican. That went back even a little further. And you had men like Calvin and Zwingli and Knox and all of them giving rise to new churches. But I'll tell you one thing. This was the first of four great epochs. And I'm going to give you four great epochs as I see it in the life and influence of BJ Palmer. And I want to compare them to four great epochs in the thinking of people about the life of JC, Jesus Christ Superstar. The first epoch, then, is this epoch. The epoch in which the Christ, or Jesus, was sectarian. Each group felt that it had a corner on him. Each group felt that somehow they wanted to return to the apostolic period. The justification for every religion. I tell my students at the Science of Mind school where I'm teaching, the justification for every religion is this: we want to return back to the heartland, or the fountainhead of the teaching. And this is what people claimed, and this is what they did in that first great epoch that I call the epoch of the sectarian dedication. And I think it is right. I think that religion must break up in order to live. It's a mitotic division. When cells seem to cease to perform their mitotic function, then you soon have the introduction of the demise of life itself. And so it may be very, very necessary. The only thing that I want to say about that is this: they made this man very, very small. They made him very small. When they tried to hug him just to their own hearts, when they said that this is the whole thing about him, because already, while this was being said, we came to the second epoch. And the second epoch, something that I have never heard people really try to figure out or to define or diagram. The second epoch was, they began to see this figure of the Galilean. They began to see him as an ecumenical figure. An ecumenical figure. What does that mean? It means that in your lifetime and mine, we are, as I said earlier, eyewitnesses to many phenomena that people haven't seen happen with such rapidity as they're happening now because of the acceleration of time. Do you realize that people who are in the field of statistics and archaeological study, they tell us that what used to take 100,000 years to develop, like the coming of the wheel, in the period following this required only 10,000 years, and that what once required 10,000 years in the Middle Ages required only 1,000 years. I'm talking about the advance of knowledge and progress. That what took 1,000 years in the Middle Ages required only 100 years in the coming of the scientific era. That what required 100 years in the coming of the scientific era required only 10 years in the coming of the electronic atomic era. And that what takes place in the electronic atomic era will soon be able to be achieved within a year. And so fast is the acceleration of the human mind. And so this is what's happening. You and I are seeing these four epochs. Second epoch was the ecumenical epoch. What does that mean? It means this, that someone began to see in this man something that Betty touched upon tonight. Although I may be reading more into it than she wished me to read into it. Began to see in this figure not only the groundwork of a science that could be traced only to DD, strong as it was, but a science and an art and a skill that I tried in my book to take back to Hippocrates and Imhotep. And that when this became recognizable, that when Hippocrates said, look to the spine, that when Galen used an adjustment in the atlas axis area of a man who had been arthritic, and the arthritis was cured, or the man was made whole, when it was realized, as I realized, that in the temple of Aesculapius there was a god whose name was pain, and that it is necessary for people to learn to follow pain in order to really understand the lesson of pain, this then became involved in the coming of the great priest, physician, teachers. And people began to see in Jesus not just something denominational. They began to see in him something highly personal in bringing together the spirit and the soul, the psyche and the soma, and the mind in what they called the temple of God. This did not happen in the Middle Ages, as you Catholics know, when people felt that it was virtuous to be sick, when hair shirts were in style, when flagellation was in order. But in the ecumenical period, when people, and this may be a little esoteric, but pick up my book over there on the grounds or wherever, pick up my book on the inner ecstasy. Let me tell you about the ecumenical movement in that book, which is too long to do here. Let me tell you what happened when people began speaking in tongues. And I don't mean only literally in glossolalia, but esoterically, mystically I'm talking now. When people began to speak in tongues, they got together on their knees, whether they were Jews, Catholics, Protestants, Zen, or whatever they may have been, because something had touched their spirit. That was what brought them together. No outer mechanism, nothing constructed, nothing construct, no device, no public relations people getting the churches together. Can't ever do it. Any more than you can get the ACA and the ICA and anybody else together on that basis. But when it hits the spirit and the heart of life, and you meet on a transpersonal level, or if you're not afraid of the word, on a spiritual level for the first time, and you see BJ walking through life as I walked at least a couple of days with him. And I heard him say some of the things which became great for me. I caught his spirit, as well as his knowledge of chiropractic. That was the vehicle. It was the spirit of BJ that was the vehicle for what took hold of me. I remember, he was so adept at phraseology, how the graffiti, really not graffiti, but I mean the slogans that covered the old cafeteria and all of that. I didn't know how many of these were original, did you? I remember that I quoted his poem, which I learned from him, "All roads that lead to God are good, what matters it your faith or mine, both center at the goal divine of love's eternal brotherhood. 1,000 creeds have come and gone, but what is that to you and me? Creeds are but branches of a tree, the root of love lives on and on. Though branch by branch prove withered wood, the root is warm with precious wine. So keep your faith and leave me mine, all roads that lead to God are good." I remember when I came out of Lyceum, old Lyceum, with that one. And I was quoting it. Who wrote it? BJ? I said, BJ. It was really Eller Wheeler Wilcox. And I was almost sued for plagiarism myself, Things like that. And so the fact of the matter is, but here was a man, you see, who, through the nature of his life, made people ecumenical. What does ecumenical really mean? It means recognizing our spiritual likeness and then letting these dissolve our intellectual and some of our pseudo-rational differences. Now you say it's idealistic. I know it's idealistic, but I'll tell you something, friends. There's something fantastically idealistic happening in America, too. Come on some of the college campuses, or you fellows who've come from college campuses. You know what's happening. You know how fluid, how alive, how fantastic this all is. That you can go all the way from a Jesus freak who comes off of hard drugs without withdrawal symptoms in an ecumenical understanding with some people of other denominations. And you can find it running that whole gamut of flexibility all the way to a Patty Hearst, whose frustrations or whatever it was have gotten her involved in one of these bizarre cloak and dagger dramas on the American scene. But this is it. And I see that BJ, in the light of our time, walking through our time, is no longer denominational, in quotes. He is ecumenical. He is ecumenical. His spirit must show through your life and mine. His spirit somehow, without him becoming your guru, but awakening the guru which is you, that when people touch you as when they touched him, and don't be like him. There was a time in the denominational period when I know chiropractors. I remember meeting Joshua Haldeman down in Africa. I have a great deal of respect for Haldeman, a very courageous man. But Haldeman, felt that he had to look like BJ in order really to live up to the BJ image. But here you are. It's the spirit, the quiet, deeply intellectual, beyond the rational mind type of thing. That is part of the training. I feel, I don't know whether you do or not, the coming of the chiropractor of tomorrow. And that is why I want to tell you, right in this ecumenical factor right here. One reason I'm really here tonight, it's an honor for me. Not a privilege, it's an honor for me to be here. One reason that I'm here is because when the chiropractic story came out, it was impossible to get that book into the public library of L.A., you who are from L.A. It was difficult to get this story read by certain members of the profession who just didn't seem to like BJ. whom BJ somehow just turned off, regardless of the debt they owed to him, turned them off. They wouldn't have anything to do with the book. I received in those days 2 tremendous letters. I brought them with me in my briefcase on the plane. One was from Dr. Lyle Sherman, and one was from Tom Gilardi. And when I heard about this school, this is where I felt I would like to come. And I'd like to pin down some of the things that I'm sharing with you now. Because this is what I really and truly believe and foresee. A school of this kind going with BJ through what I believe is this transitional period in these 4 categories. Where can it be better be done than in a school that is new? In a school that is unhampered? In the school that is traditional without having tradition? In a school that has a landmark of the Spirit. In a school where literally someone must have walked into this place at one time with all the tobacco sheds and the dogs and everything else, and said, put their foot down and said, the temple is already built. You know, I must share one thing with you, and that is that I was the only person, and with my wife, who was permitted to accompany the Mormons on the reenactment of their trek in 1949 from Nauvoo to Salt Lake City. And you know, this, you'll never forget this, I don't believe. Because when we got there after 7 or 17, I forget how many days it was a long time, Conestoga wagon simulated over automobiles. When we got to there they reenacted the drama of the time when Brigham Young came to this desolate desert place. And you know what he did when he came there in 1849? He took, with his rag end followers, you know, he took a stick and he stuck the stick into the sand and he said, this is the place. We will make the desert blossom like the rose. Well, when I came, they were having a reenactment of this drama. And I know the guy that was playing the part of Brigham Young. He was very nervous. And he got out in front of the whole group, you know, and he strode over dramatically with his stick. And he forgot his inflection, and he put it down, and he said, this is the place? Well, anyhow. So, now I want to come to the third category. But you see, already in your time and mine, JC is no longer ecumenical. He has already become universal. What does that mean? It means that whereas once he was strictly Christian, now he has become interreligious. I have an Islamic boy in my class at the Science of Mind. I have a Jewish student in my class in the Science of Mind. They look upon Jesus as a great teacher, as the great teacher which he was. They look upon him as one who inherited from Gamaliel, probably even the Golden Rule. They recognize that here is a figure who has been locked out because of doctrinal and dogmatic theological practices from becoming a teacher along with the teachers of other great faiths. The Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Patanjali, the great Hindu teachers, the great Sufi teachers, the great Zoroastrian teachers. Belongs in there. And through this now, there's coming a new movement. I feel it. I don't think, if you'll forgive my saying so, I don't think anybody feels it more than I. I don't think anyone knows more about it than I do. How Jesus Christ Superstar, on one level, has become Jesus the teacher on another level, has become an avatar on another level. So much so that Dr. Radhakrishnan, who became The President of India told me in an interview, he said there are sayings of Jesus that have been written into Hindu literature as though they had always been there. The universal figure has now come about. Now what's happened in the trail, or what is happening as BJ walks through our time? Well, I want to tell you something. I think if BJ were here in the flesh, now this is just speculation, just maybe my wishful thinking, but I believe if BJ were here today and I would say, BJ, I've run into something tremendously interesting in a new parapsychological breakthrough in the realm of health, the power of the mind over man, the need for the body to be perfectly balanced and for the spine to be perfectly attuned, for the life flow, BJ, of what you call innate to work throughout the media of the body, as the acupuncturists believe it to be. I would say, come along, let me take you to the Academy of Medicine and Parapsychology. Let me show you what's going on there. I believe he would say, well, let's look into it anyhow, and I'll give you my opinion. I believe that if I had said to him, when Dr., what was his name up there at San Jose, either Culver or Custer, the chiropractor up there, do you know that when the chiropractic story came out, did you young chiropractic students know this? That the head of the Pre-Med Society of Stanford University, one of the great so-called medical schools in our country, this young man had been injured, had a back injury. It didn't respond to medical care, as they rarely do. And he came to the chiropractor in San Jose, and he was not only helped, but cured. And he requested of the medical faculty that the students be exposed to chiropractic. And this doctor from San Jose called me and said, would you go up with me to spend a couple of hours with these students? And I said, I can't believe it, that the medical profession of a college would ever, a university, would ever permit a chiropractor to do this. And he said, well, it's the pre-med students who've gotten the permission, and we'll have to meet between 12 and 2 o'clock during the noon hour. And I went up with him. There were about 125 students there and about 3 or 4 faculty members. I was never so proud of a chiropractor in my life as I was of this man from San Jose when he expounded chiropractic, and for 2 hours he and I from a layman's point of view, historically answered questions about the path of health and healing which led to the coming of the Palmer School of Chiropractic, the fountainhead of chiropractic in America. And I'll never forget, I must share this with you, when these students applauded at intervals, I could see the annoyance of these white-clad faculty members who were sitting there. And then either I or Dr. Culver asked what the faculty men thought about this. And one of the doctors got up and he said, I'll tell you what I think. When you chiropractors learn to speak our language, we'll be able to communicate. But as long as you're talking one language and we're talking another, you can't expect any line of communication. And this man, this chiropractor from San Jose, and would it be a joke if he'd be here tonight, he got up and he said, well, let me tell you about a case I had. And he went down through the case history using medical terms, at least as far as I was concerned, so convincing that when he got through, the students were cheering for this man. I say this is a new period. This is no longer the denominational sectarian period, no longer the ecumenical period in human life, but now it is the universal period when people are ready and eager. Oh, I know it's not easy. I want to tell you something. I have 2 friends One is on crutches. The other one is walking with terrific difficulty because he had a spinal fusion. And the other one is a druggist, very close friend of mine, who for the past year I have been pleading with him to go to a chiropractor. He doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go. Is first worked out in the unseen. Every metaphysician knows this. That which you hold in the ideal becomes the real. It is first spiritual, and then it is what we like to call material. The realm of the unseen is the realm of cause, and the realm of the seen is the realm of effect. And the nature and the condition of the seen is always directed and confirmed by the nature and the condition of the unseen or the cause. This is BJ philosophy, not innate philosophy necessarily, but his philosophy of life, the picturization, the thoughtography. Do you think this man had everything come to him as easily as he did? Do you know about the moments of silence that this man had? Do you know his technique, the solitude, that to me was often almost, now that I know about it, Zen-like? Do you know about what I would call his use of koans, K-O-A-N, his abstruse thinking, which in real Zen fashion brought him down to the nitty-gritty of confrontation with his own quest in the healing field? It wasn't that magical. It wasn't that magical. It was being worked out in the unseen. And this is it. And then over and above it all, always this concept of innate. In this great third period, which many chiropractors, I honestly feel, have never even touched. They don't know that BJ was great because he was illogical, in quotes, when other people were logical. He was irrational when other people said, you've got to be rational. He refused to use common sense because he already lived in a world where we needed some uncommon thinking. And this is what made the man. And this is, as I see him walking through our time, and now the concluding period. And I've sketched these perhaps all too briefly. The fourth period I see again in the life of the Galilean. Something fantastic has happened, to him. Nowadays, you see, people who recognize all of this. They're liberated people. They're integrated people. I don't see really, I often tell my students this, I don't see how anyone can be integrated in a world like this unless they begin to think the way I do. You just have to accept truth, is where you find it. And then you test it empirically and you fit it into the total circumference of truth. And this is what is now happening to the Galilean. He was once sectarian. He became ecumenical. He became universal, and is still so. But for those people who are on the march, he is now something else. He is now cosmic. And when I say this, I don't want you to think that Bach is trying to be grandiose. I just want you to open sometime the pages of a book like The Phenomenon of Man by Teilhard de Chardin. Read. Read what this Jesuit paleontologist has to say. This man who was banished by the Catholic Church for 25 years in China, and only the love of that beautiful peasant pope with whom I had a special audience, Pope John, said, come on home, Teilhard. And Teilhard came home with a phenomenon of man. And it is the phenomenon of man that has rocked the foundations of the Catholic Church. It isn't the pill. It isn't the celibate or non-celibate priesthood. It isn't the sociological situation alone. It is the thinking of this man who said, you're never really going to love the Christ until you love the earth. And you're never going to really love your fellow man until you understand that in this fellow man, no matter what his color, his creed, his culture, his race may be, there is this essence of the divine. He even coined a term. He called it the Christic energy. I don't want to be sentimental, but I'm so close to this. I have workshops in these fields. As I walked here through the damp grass tonight, I wish that I had not worn my shoes or my stockings. When you cover your feet with leather, you know you cover the earth with leather. I wish I could have felt and feel the free electrons of the earth that Taylor talked about, that Ed Mitchell talks about now on programs that I've shared with him in his new foundation of a Noetic fellowship. Because they're beginning to believe that this earth itself is God's creation for man. It may be the only planet in the galaxy so blessed that you and I, for a little while, for some strange and unknown reason, should experience life in the flesh, to see what the temple of God, is really like. The coming of the cosmic figure. And into this, I see BJ walking. Because he's always been there. He was always cosmic. He must always have been thinking of these secret signals of the universe, which have given rise today in your life and mine to such far out thoughts as Cleve Baxter, with whom I was on a program in Montreal, where he did his experiment with the philodendron plant. That the death of the brine shrimp should have caused an agony in the leaves of the plant. This was BJ. This is BJ. This is you, BJ, walking here tonight, I feel, as a cosmic figure, or at least making us more aware of our relationship to the cosmos. That the adjustment is more than just the thrust. That education is more than just learning the routine and the scientific aspects. That philosophy, as I'm sure it is being taught here under Dr. Gold, is more than just a concept of innate playing around with words, but is deep within a living union with some great God force moving in and through the earth and in and through your life and mine. I must close, but I can't close without telling you just one thing in closing. If BJ were here, I don't know how he felt about this field, and I don't want to throw anything into my discussion that is more controversial than some things I may already have said. But you know, I've been on a program of deep research since I have seen most of you the past 2 years. And in one of these programs, in my research, I've also engaged in fasting, F-A-S-T-I-N-G, for the first time. And I have, with uncanny prognostication, I have been able, in the workshops that we've been holding, where chiropractors have often attended, MDs have attended, I've been able, with some kind of a ESP, to judge from groups of 200 or 300, 400, how many people have become interested in fasting. May not have anything to do with chiropractic, but I just want to make this point, that at some future point, it's going to have something to do with the total health of the total person. And it's going to knock this medical profession and the drug cartels sky high. because people are beginning to discover within themselves resources and a power and a potential which is greater than anything they've ever realized. And I'm telling you, all it needs is a certain type of leadership, and it is coming. But what I really wanted to say to you is this. During a recent 7-day fast, on the 4th day, I came home. This happened in Hawaii. I came up to our apartment, rather. My wife was ironing. I asked her to put the iron aside. I had been out bicycle riding for about 2 hours. I jumped up on the ironing board and I said, Lorena, I said, you and I are very fortunate people to have been able to put ourselves in the place of so many disciplines and all of this. She, you know, comes from the Wittenberg chiropractic clan. And I said, it's wonderful. But I said, I want to tell you something. I feel something right now that I've never felt before. I felt a cleanliness under the skin that I'd never felt in all my life. When I take a chiropractic adjustment, I feel rings of health. I'm very responsive. Well, I need to tell you, I'm a great devotee of chiropractic. But I had a feeling of cleanliness under the skin, and something said to me, out of Scripture, I guess, one thing that had always bothered me with my research among Pentecostal groups and so forth was a phrase, washed by the blood. Washed by the blood. It surely turned me off. But I wonder tonight, as I'm putting this together, maybe in this cosmic factor, there may be such a thing as being washed by the purification of our blood. To a degree, if we will put it all together, our nutritional obligation to this temple of God, our obligation of exercise to this temple of God, our obligation to good posture to this temple of God, our obligation to having opened up anything that might impinge the life flow in this temple of God. I wonder if there may be really a sense of health and well-being that many people have really never experienced. Even what they might have felt was a peak experience. Cosmically, we're part of Mother Earth. And through all of this, BJ is walking. When Schweitzer talked about JC, he used these words with which I'd like to close. He said, in all of this struggle of people trying to find the real uncatchable Galilean, this is what Schweitzer said. He comes to us without a name. As of old by the lakeside, he came to those who knew him not. He speaks to us the same words, follow me, and sets us to tasks which he has to do in our time. He commands, and to those who obey him, whether they be wise or simple, he will reveal himself in the joys, the sufferings, the triumphs, and the tragedies which they pass through in his fellowship. And as an ineffable mystery, we will all realize in our own heart who he is. And this, I believe, fellow students and chiropractic staff and chiropractic people, something like this, I believe, should be said to that segment of the chiropractic profession who has as high an ideal as you have, and who has the courage that you must have had to start this school, and who already realize the tremendous pull of the consciousness that is going to make Sherman College the place you want it to be. Someone should say to you that BJ is walking through the world and walking through your life and calling you to the highest possible place in chiropractic and all it means in the life of man. Thank you.